at this point, I now have a constant view and understanding of which records are assigned to which queue, in this case, the desktop queue, and the staff members that are assigned there as well. So again, that's may seem to be elementary for maybe some new customers, but that was one of the things that that was corrected in the winter release version for those of you that have been a Remedyforce customer. So I think you'll find a lot of value in having this audit and capabilities now. In addition to that, this gives us the ability to also respect any type of segregation that we may have defined with roles and profiles. Okay, let's move on to some of the other functionality that was introduced in version or the Winter13 release. Moving right into release management. So as we look at release management, again, this is a new tab, so we'd simply add the tab to your tab set, and from there we can see any and all releases. There are default views that you can customize and create. In this case, I've got a single release that is available here, and so let's go ahead and just take a look at this existing release record. So at this point, as you could imagine, if we were going to do a new Exchange 2013 upgrade when that comes out, there's quite a bit more than just simply inserting a disk on a server and running an executable. We might need to make, we might be upgrading the hardware. We might have to make additional network changes and configurations, as well as the installation of the software. We may have a development or test environment that we want to set up in addition to our production environment. So as you can imagine, there's typically many changes that have to occur and that are all correlated to this one event or this one release. And so release management truly allows us to manage that type of a process. So it's very similar to the change request when you look at it, but as you begin to delve into the details of this form, you'll notice, for example, that we have a number of linked changes to this request. We have the linked services and CIs. One thing to point out here, this is a really nice enhancement. If any of the changes that are linked to this release, if they have CIs linked to them, such as the network devices here, and we've got some database server information and so forth, or different servers, well, these assets were linked to the changes that are associated to this release. So by simply clicking this button, Link from Change Request, it'll bring in all of those assets from those individual changes. Now, as we another element to this release module is the release manifest, and this is really where, as a release coordinator, you can truly manage all of these activities and making sure that none of the changes are overstepping one another. And so in this situation, we're seeing both of our changes that are released, and we have the option of executing the order or defining the order in which these tasks should be executed. So if I wanted, two things to happen at once, so it is important to note that this would support both a serial and parallel process, or and in addition to the order in which these items can be modified and managed here in the manifest, we also have the ability to define the statuses for each of these elements as it relates. So if we do a refresh, that's simply going to update the order in which these changes need to happen. If we need to view the records themselves from here, we absolutely have the ability of doing that. And then at this point, we can export this information or print it as a report. So again, if you are a project manager that's managing these releases in major projects in your environment, I think you'll find this tool to be very useful. In addition to the management from an order of execution and the status of all these different tasks, we also have this information available to us in the change schedule. So at this point, you can see that there are a couple of releases, and here we can see the individual changes that make up those items. And by simply clicking on that record, that's going to open up the records, obviously, but to floating over these items, we can see, for example, who the release coordinator is. We can see what the start and implementation, start and end dates for implementation, as well as the deployment. So a subtle difference there in terms of implementation and deployment. Implementation is when we're actually building out the work or building out the environment. Deploying it is when we actually put it in production. So you can see that there's different dates associated with that. And just like any of the other modules within Remedyforce, you do have the ability to customize the objects, customize the forms as you wish. Okay. Well, with that, so at this point we've talked about the chatter capability. We've talked about the integration with Asset Core. We've also talked about release management. So those are really the key components within the Winter release. So at this point, if there are any questions, I'd be glad to take those questions at this time. And certainly, if they're product related or implementation, I should point out that the implementation as it relates to Winter13, if you have not been contacted by BMC, I'm sure they will be contacting you very soon to let you know, one, that it is available and has been available since November 15th, but more importantly, so that they can schedule the implementation or the update. And so, understand that you do not have to move this straight to production. You have the option of implementing this Winter release in your sandbox environment first and foremost, and then from there you can do your testing. Once you're comfortable with the testing, from there you'd have the ability to then move it to production. So again, that's all part of your licensing and maintenance and service contract that you have with BMC software. So if you, at any point whenever you're ready for that, contact support if they've not contacted you, and let them know that you're ready to upgrade the solution. So any questions out there at this point? Valerie, I don't know if we've gotten any questions over the queue, but if so, I'll be glad to take those at this time.
Hey, Ron?
Yes.
All right. Great job. I had just as you were going through the presentations, a couple of questions came to mind. And the first one was, when you start talking about chatter, I know that the people that have licenses, I guess the analysts, certainly have access and can chatter back and forth. And I think you had, I don't know if it was Peggy Olson or Don Draper, Peter Campbell. There they are. These are all these Mad Men cast of characters. Right. But what about somebody like Joan Holloway or Roger Sterling, who also may be part of the same company, but wouldn't necessarily have a license? Would they be able to chatter as well?
Well, yes, they would. So the same model applies in the sense that for every one staff license that you purchase, so an analyst that a service desk analyst, a specialist that's resolving incidents and has access to the full version of Remedyforce that you're seeing here, for every one of those, customers are entitled to 250 self-service licenses, which give them access to chatter. And the interesting thing about chatter is that not only is it available through the Force.com platform, but in addition, it's also available through a mobile device. So there is a chatter app that customers can access and utilize that. And then there's also a desktop application that can be installed. So yes, those customers would absolutely have the ability to view. And I'm just bringing it up on this emulator here, so you can kind of see what chatter would look like through a mobile device.
Okay. Well, what in your experience, what? Yeah, in your experience, because different companies use different things or different tools for messaging, right?
Right.
So what do companies typically do? Do they take a look at Chatter and say, hey, this is great, we want to use this, and we're not going to use Instant Messenger anymore, or how does that work?
Well, I think it's obviously going to vary from organization to organization, depending upon the organization's adoption to the Force.com platform. Certainly, with Remedyforce the way that it is, it basically is now a tool that everyone within the company would have access to. That might be one of those considerations where you use the Chatter capability, and again, you do have this gives you chat capabilities and the ability to post and follow individuals and so forth. So certainly you can it might replace other tools, and then other organizations may use their chat utilities that they're currently using. What's nice here is that it's interfaced with Remedyforce, and it's going to allow business customers to approve request for new software, new hardware, allow the business to participate in the change approval process, all those types of things.
Okay. I have another question, and then I know we have some questions coming in. I really enjoyed when you went through the AssetCore presentation, and I know AssetCore is not a SaaS-based product, but it's an on-premise-based tool. How do you, I guess, marry the two different products? I mean, obviously, if you're using Remedyforce, you're used to a SaaS model, and you're not used to having to install software. But if you use AssetCore, if you bring that in, then you're going to have a server, and you're going to have to install it somewhere within your environment. Is that kind of the way you're going to have to go? And about how long would it take you to get AssetCore up and running then?
So that is true. AssetCore, being an on-premise solution, would need to be installed in your environment, and we're using the native APIs to be able to communicate with Remedyforce and update the CMDB and pass the calls back and forth between the on-premise AssetCore and Remedyforce, obviously being in the cloud. So in terms of an implementation, that's really going to vary depending upon what functionality of AssetCore that you choose to implement. As I'd mentioned before, AssetCore includes Inventory Manager, which is an auto-discovery solution, Remote Control for remote desktop capabilities, Deployment Manager for software and OS deployment, Patch Management for patches, and those goes beyond patches just for Windows operating systems. That's Adobe, all types of applications can be managed there, as well as your Compliance Manager, Power Manager, and even a Migration Manager for those customers that maybe are looking to move from XP to Windows 8 or from Windows 7 to Windows 8, that type of thing. So depending upon of those different modules that are provided by AssetCore, that's obviously going to determine the level of effort involved in the implementation. But what I can tell you is that just basic inventory capability with remote control, it's about a 5-day implementation there.
Okay.
And that'll vary depending upon the complexity of the customer's environment.
Okay. I don't know if you can see the questions or not, but there's one here that I can go ahead and read that just came in.
Okay.
And it ties in a little bit to what we were talking about. Is the client platform agnostic? In other words, Chatter, self-service, and so on, meaning seamless and retains full feature set on Macintosh, Windows, Unix, and etc.
So AssetCore does support Linux, Mac OS, as well as Windows environments.